Welcome back to An Athlete's Journey. I'm your host, Travis Reed, and today I got a special guest, somebody I used to look up to, literally. Because he was he don't know this, but he was one of the reasons why I went to UCLA. I used to watch him and Tracy Murray and Don McClain and all them play together. You know what I'm saying? Like they were like to me when I watched them play, I was like, man, I want to run out that tunnel. I want to be one of them, you know what I'm saying? And like they were the standard, you know. Like SC was cool for football, but as the standard of basketball in California was nothing bigger than
Nothing bigger,
UCLA,
baby.
nothing bigger than
Nothing
UCLA,
bigger.
you know.
Nothing.
And so I mean, like I said, I watched him when he was in movies like Blue Chips and things like that. So I just want to give him his props and his love because, like I said, he definitely one of those, people that, I thought that like I said, I looked up to. I wanted to be like him, like he was such a great player. He was one of those like it's weird because his game would translate more today than it maybe it did back then because I felt like he can go inside, he can go outside, he can guard the perimeter, he can guard the post. I remember we used to play pickup at UCLA. He was guarding Don McClain 6'10", you know.
Yeah,
So, and
yeah.
I always remember that. I was like, man, is Mitch Garden Don McClain? But like I said, thank you again, big bro, Mr. Butler. I appreciate it. Uh,
Absolutely.
thank you for joining the show.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me, man. Those were some good times back in the day, playing at UCLA, down in the blue and the gold, and, graduating, going on, getting an opportunity to play professional ball, and then coming back, man, and trying to help out the young guys, seeing you guys come along, man, and getting a chance to call some of your games on Fox Sports. You guys are good, man. You guys took the mantle from us. Y'all took it to a whole other level. And obviously, I've had a lot of success with a lot of you and your teammates being able to move on and play professional ball. A lot of people think it's got to be the NBA, but it doesn't, man. You go overseas and you play high level overseas. It's just as competitive as being over here playing in the NBA. So, kudos to you, bro, for carving out that career for yourself too.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah. So, I mean, we'll get into it,
Yeah,
but well, let's start with the first question. How did your journey start, in basketball or any sport?
man, it was real weird. When I was, I think, my brothers. I have two older brothers, 5, 6 years older than me. Um, they went away to camp. And I remember I was home alone with my mom, and I'm in my apartment building. I'm at one of my friend's house. We were watching TV, and there was this sleepaway camp on TV. So I go up to my mom. I'm 9 years old. I'm like, I want to go to sleepaway camp, and she's like, well, heck yeah, I can get rid of your butt for a few weeks in the summer. I'm all right. So she managed the apartment building we lived in. She asked a couple of people around. Ironically enough, there was a guy named Happy Hairston who was a starting power forward on the Lakers' first championship team here in 1972 with Wilt and Jerry and Gail Goodridge and all of those guys. And he held a camp down in Westminster Garden Grove area. And it was $35 for 3 weeks, bro. It was unreal, man. And I got a chance to go to the camp. I didn't know where I was going, and I was in the car driving with my mom. I thought she was driving to a whole other country, man. It felt like, and I'm in Inglewood just driving right on down to Westminster Garden Grove. But at 9 years old, man, I felt like I was in the car forever. But we get down there, she drops me off. We get into the camp. I'm playing well. I'm looking up to some of the older guys there. One of the big bros that was there, still in the basketball world now, doing a lot of great stuff. DeAnthony Langston.
Hmm.
He was, DeAnthony's probably 4 or 5 years older than me, so he was one of the older guys at the camp that I looked up to. And I played well at the camp, and got all of these awards, and you know, it started to take off from there. Um, I didn't stay local to my school. My school would have been Morningside High School. Um, Happy Harrison had a youth foundation where he took kids from the inner city and placed them in private schools all around. the LA area. So he had Brentwood, he had Crossroads, he had Harvard at the time. It wasn't Harvard Westlake, it was just Harvard. Oakwood, which was the school I went to, Chadwick, which was, um, up in Palos Verdes. He had a bunch of schools, Bel Air Prep, which is now, I think, Pacific Christian, or maybe even changed their name again. But I ended up going to Oakwood, man, and didn't really know what basketball held for me. I was young. I was sixth grade. Um, Started to be able to dunk a ball
Mm-hmm.
around sixth, seventh grade. And it kind
Okay.
of got out in the community. And then I remember the Pump brothers, David and Dana Pump.
Mm-hmm.
They were a lot older. They started coming to my middle school games, and everybody would come just to see me get a breakaway and try to go up and dunk the ball as a seventh, eighth grader. And stayed at the school, didn't leave. All of the schools around the city in LA were calling my house, complaining to my mom, saying, "Hey, he should be playing, here at Crenshaw. He should be playing, um, all these different places." And turns out that we stayed at the school, man, and it ended up working out for me. I was the first city kid that really went to a small school.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, you did have guys like, Leon Wood and guys like that are ahead of me that went to Bourbon Day, which is a private school too, but it's a bit of a bigger school and was known for basketball. Um, we're talking about going to a small school and putting a small school on the map. I went, and then I think coming after me were Austin and Barron at
Mm-hmm.
Crossroads, who
Mm-hmm.
were really good players. Then the Collins twins.
Yeah.
And then now, if you look at the high school basketball landscape, it's the small schools, the independent private schools that have the better players, and the city
Mm-hmm.
schools now, and the bigger public schools, they're struggling to get the better players. So, that was the beginning of the journey for me. Getting over to Oakwood, playing well, playing with Tracy Murray, Derek Martin on a lot of all-star teams growing up. Was fortunate enough to make the McDonald's game in '89. Um, Tracy Murray and I were the two representatives from Southern California. Calvin Bird up north from the Bay Area, also rep Cali. We were in the game with Kenny Anderson, Allen Houston, Shaquille O'Neal, Jimmy Jackson, Bobby Hurley, um, James Hollywood Robinson, Jeff Webster. There were several guys, Conrad McCray, off that team that had an opportunity to play in the league.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Alonzo
man, that
Mourning was there
was
too, right?
no, Alonzo was a year before, so he was
Okay.
he was
Okay.
that '88 class, and that
Okay.
was a real good class. That was Derek Martin, Chris Jackson, Billy Owens, Lonzo Mourning, Sean Kemp, Gerard Mustaf. Like, they had a crew of guys. I think we had 13 guys play in the league. They might have had 15, and then I think there are two more years that were just really outstanding when you go back in the day. I think it was Paul Pierce's year.
Yeah. Yeah. 95 was probably the
Yeah,
best one, you know?
yeah, that was a stupid year, man. Those
Yeah.
guys,
Yeah. Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
you look at that crew. I mean, they not only, they went into the league and they did work. We
Yeah.
had
Yeah.
guys. There were a bunch of us that made it and were role players and the bench players. Like those guys went in and they put in serious work. So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but that paved the way to UCLA, man. Got there, got to campus. We started to right the ship. Unfortunately, Hazard had some lean years, and he was the one who recruited me and was the primary reason why I probably ended up at UCLA. But he had some lean years, got fired a full year before I committed. So
Mm-hmm.
he got fired going into that 88, 89 season. And then I came in 89, 90 under Jim Herrick. And,
Mm-hmm.
we round the corner, man. We were competing for league championships. We were competing for deep runs into the tournament.
Mm-hmm.
My third year there, we we went to the Elite Eight, and we were probably a Final Four finals team at
Yeah.
least. We were ranked as high as number two in the country. Um,
Was that the
we
year I lost
had
to Indiana?
Yeah, that was the year Indiana smacked. We
Yeah,
beat them.
yeah, yeah,
I beat
yeah.
them. Yeah, it was the crazy thing, Travis. We beat them the first game of the season by 30. We smacked them in the Hall of Fame Tip-Off Classic. We were unranked. I think they were ranked in the top 10, and we just crushed them.
I remember. I remember. I was
Oh,
like, oh,
man.
UCLA about to go back to the Final Four when y'all played
Yeah,
them in the Elite
man.
Eight.
We crushed them, and, we see them in the tournament. And, they scouted us really well. They cut off the high post pass to me, and it really just stagnated the offense at that particular
Mm-hmm,
time.
mm-hmm,
And it ended up costing us, man. We should have went to the four. We probably could have made it to the finals that year. We were
mm-hmm.
good enough to, all of the guys on that team. Shoot, we had 10 guys on that team playing the NBA at some point.
Wow, wow.
You know what I'm saying? Let's we had Gerald Mackins, Don McClain, Tracy Murray, me, Derek Martin, Tyus Edney, George Zedick, Ed O'Bannon were guys on that team.
Yeah.
Rodney Zimmerman played a little bit with the
Yeah,
Pistons.
yeah,
He got
yeah,
a few weeks with the Pistons.
yeah.
And then Richard Petruska was a redshirt guy that year. He redshirted with us. We had 10 guys, man, on that team. At some
That
point, touch the league. So, those are good fun times, man, at UCLA. Lifelong memories. And then, really getting a chance to see the guys come up after you. That's what you're really pumped up and you're excited about too. You have such a good time there. But then when you leave and you look back at the young guys, so you see Baron Davis, you see Earl Watson, you see Toby Bailey, you see Chris Johnson, JR. You just start going down the line of different guys that came in and just did a great job. Your whole crew with Matt, was Jerome Moiso with you
Yep,
guys too?
Jerome
Yeah,
Wiesel,
Jerome
Dan Gadzuric.
Moiso, Dan
Yeah,
Gadzuric, man.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Ray Young, a bunch of us.
Yeah, y'all had a crew, man. Y'all had a crew. Jelani, like, shoot,
Yep.
man. It was fun watching you guys, man, because you guys repped well, man. Y'all went out, y'all competed hard. Y'all had fun. Y'all had fun,
Hmm.
man. There was a
Hmm.
lot of lives and a lot of trash talk. It's like, yeah, young fellas, get your thing, get your game on, man. It was good. It was real good.
No, no, definitely, definitely.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, you become one of the best high school players in the country. What would you say your most memorable moment in high school was? We want to just kind of go back.
I had some crazy moments, man, because yeah, I had a female coach in high school.
Oh,
And I the
okay.
only female coach in America, coach varsity boys basketball. She was tough on me too. I remember we had a game, we played Rebay Academy, and it was a playoff game, and uh we were scared. So our team was scared. Some of the guys came in, they started warming up and they were playing above the rim. So, first few minutes of the game, they jumped out on us, and my coach called a timeout, and she says, no one shoots the ball until he touches it at least once. And it was me. And I didn't, I just played the game. I tried to always get my teammates involved in everything. We ended up beating them 55-48, and I had 50 of my team's 55 points.
Oh, okay.
And I outscored the other team. And I remember the reporter at the end of the game, I think it was Eric Schottenheimer, came up to me and he was like, you outscored the other team. And I was like, what? I don't ever keep track of stuff like that. And he was like, yeah, you scored 50 and they 48. And I was like, oh, man. So it was a big write up in the paper. That was probably a good, memorable moment for me. We won CIF Southern Section for our division. That was another big moment for me.
Hmm.
We
Hmm.
beat Big Pine. Um, Final game was a monster game for me. We lost to a team out of San Diego, and I had 55 points and 28 rebounds in that game as a final high school game. So,
Oh my
um,
God.
there was some,
Okay.
it was, there were some good moments, man.
Hmm. Hmm.
There were some good moments in high school. Great memories with teammates and friends. Not only at my high school, but when I got a chance to move out on the circuit and play with a bunch of friends that, are from the city that I grew up with,
Hmm.
guys like Harold Miner, Sam Crawford, Adonis Jordan, Deion Thomas, Zan Mason, went to UCLA with him, and obviously Tracy Murray was my guy. We played on all of our teams together. So, those memories were special for me too.
Hmm. 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 Now, you obviously being one of the top players in the country, why UCLA and not, did you have a top three, top five, or whatever the case is? Why'd you pick UCLA?
I'll tell you this, UCLA. I'll tell you the story of how it all went down. So,
Okay.
um, Duke was my number one choice.
Oh,
Um,
okay. This is
it
something I
was,
didn't know. Okay,
yeah,
okay,
it was
okay.
really, really strange because recruiting opened up, um, and Bobby Hurley and Bill McCaffrey went in on their visit the first week to Duke, and they committed on the spot.
Oh, oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Duke had one scholarship left. I came in the second week and had a great trip. I'm 17. I remember at the end of the trip, I'm riding back with Coach K. We're flying from Durham to Atlanta, and he was going to a coaching convention, an ACC coaching convention, and I was flying from Atlanta back to LA. That was my
Hmm.
connection.
Okay.
So we're on the plane. Coach K says, "So, what do you want to do? There's one scholarship left, and I'm offering it to you right now." I'm 17. I'm nervous, man. I'm like,
I
it
imagine right on the spot,
Yeah,
like
it was crazy, man. It was crazy. So, I say to him, listen, you know, just give me a couple of weeks. I got UCLA. UCLA had been recruiting me since I was in eighth grade. I just want to get through that trip, and then, basically, I'm telling him I'm gonna come.
yeah, yeah.
So the next week happens. I'm up at Cal. Thomas Hill comes in
Hmm.
from
Hmm.
Houston, and Thomas Hill wants to commit.
I
He's
remember
ready to
Thomas Hill.
commit. Yeah, he's
Yeah.
ready to commit.
Yeah.
So Coach K calls me one more time and says, "Yo, he wants to commit. What do you want to do?" I was a little bit bigger than Thomas Hill, and I think they were thinking more McCaffrey at the two, Bobby at the one, and then Bricky was a senior, Robert Bricky.
Right, right,
And
right,
they were thinking, I could kind of move into that role. Although they had Brian Davis there, who was a really good player for them too. So um, So I said, Coach, listen, just one more week. Let me get to UCLA, and we're gonna be all right. So I think Thomas was putting a lot of pressure on him. They thought that because Thomas was going to go to Houston, University of
right.
Houston.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
So right before I got ready to take my trip into UCLA, they told me that they were going to take uh, Thomas Hill. So I was like, okay. So I did my trip to UCLA. I had a great trip to UCLA. Then I took a trip the following week to Arizona. And the last week, I was going to take a trip to Kansas.
Hmm.
And I just canceled the trip to Kansas and just committed to UCLA after the Arizona trip because I was like, why am I? I don't think I go to any of these other schools. It was either going to be Duke or UCLA.
Right.
And when Duke, took Thomas Hill, you know, UCLA was then the top choice.
Right, 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 right. No,
Yeah.
honestly, it makes sense. I think that, you and Grant Hill, obviously he came in a little bit, I think the
Hmm.
next year,
Yep.
that'd have been a big lineup because he would have had to move you to the two guard and
Yeah.
put Grant at the three. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, yeah. That actually, but I think it all worked out, for everybody.
It,
So,
it did. I think when I look back over my career, I look at it and I say, there are no regrets.
hmm. Hmm.
Duke won two national championships during that time. I thought we really had a legitimate shot to win one in '92.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think the '95 crew with Tyus, George Zedek, and Ed, they learned a lot from our crew in '92.
Hmm.
So they
Hmm.
knew what to do. And you're talking about guys having huge roles. like Toby Bailey, Chris Johnson, J.R. Henderson, Charles O'Bannon, that were young guys. Our problem with our team, and we'll say this to the day, when we all get together, that we weren't quite as unselfish as we should have been.
Right, right,
You
right.
know, McLean and Murray were gifted scorers, but we all felt like we could score. I mean, Tracy was number one in the state all time in scoring when he finished high school our year. I think I was three or four. Derek Martin might have been in the top 10 all time in scoring in the state. So, we had guys capable of filling it up. It was just we weren't we weren't together as a group like they were. And I think if we had dug deep into the barrel, um, we could have made it to the championship game. And then it's a one game. Anything can happen in
Yeah,
one
no,
game. Yeah.
y'all. I was saying y'all had so much talent. Like I said, I watched y'all every game, like the Cosby
Mm,
Show. You know what I'm
yeah.
saying? Me and Pop sit
Right.
down, like, yo, the game
Right.
on. All right,
Right.
all right, good,
Yeah.
okay, okay, okay. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
I'll be doing my homework and looking at the game.
That's crazy, bro. That's crazy.
Yeah, because my mom be like, you can't watch the game until you do his homework. All right, come on, come on. You do the homework while I watch the game. All right,
There we go. There we go.
yeah, yeah. So man, I could see y'all had so much talent. Like I just felt like the Pac-10 at that time obviously had just a slew of like just great players. Y'all had all y'all like 4 or 5 NBA dudes. You said 10 at one point. SC had dudes with Minor and Pat and Lorenzo Orr and all that. Arizona, with the Sean Elliott, Sean Rooks got rest of soul, and all
Yeah.
them, all them. So like everybody, even Arizona State had players. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? So like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
what was the tank you wasn't you was out I think Tank that dude Tank was after you right or was he there?
Yeah, this was after me. Headache Smith was down there. Dwayne Fontana.
Yeah. Okay.
They had some guys. Mario Bennett was after us too.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and, and Mario was super talented,
Yep.
down there. But yeah, like you said, man, through the conference, I mean, shoot, you go up to Oregon. Terrell Brandon was a
Mm-hmm.
beast. At Oregon State at one point. I mean, Gary Payton was there my freshman year. He was a monster. Stanford had a solid squad with Adam Keefe and
Yep. I
and
was like every team had it was like weird. Every
yeah,
team had pro. Every team had a pro.
had a guy. You know what I'm
It
saying?
had a
So
guy.
you were like, hold on. So yeah, man, just crazy talent. Throughout the conference, and guys that could play, and the Pac-10 represented well, man. It's sad
Mm.
to see it not be here and be a part of this whole melee
Yeah.
of, conference
Yeah.
realignment. You
Yeah.
would think
Yeah.
that they would want something on the West Coast to represent the West Coast. But USC and UCLA jumping over to the Big Ten just pretty much, that put
Yeah.
a
I
TNT in it and just blew it up.
I thought it was a money grab. I respectfully, like it
Yeah,
was a money
yeah,
grab, but
yeah,
I remember I talked about that when it happened. I was like, yeah, I get it, money grab, whatever, whatever. I mean, when you said
yeah,
like when they left, it just blew.
yeah. I mean, when SC in football is making less than Northwestern in football, that's a problem. You know what
Yes,
I'm saying?
yeah,
So, Northwestern, usually has a tough time competing at the top of the Big Ten, but, they get their share and, it's 20, $30 million more than SC. And
yeah,
SC's like, well, wait a minute. Like, and we all know, listen, football is the generator.
yeah, of course, yeah,
That's the sport that keeps everything going. And then, if you're a basketball heavy school like we are at UCLA, you certainly can sustain yourself and maybe, your sister program, the girls program, but, you're
mhm.
not digging down and helping out many other programs like football can. So,
True, true, true,
yeah,
true,
yeah,
true. Now, obviously, I was going back to a little bit, like you being one of the top players in the country, and obviously you decided to go to UCLA. Um, What was like the biggest difference between your first year at UCLA and obviously being one of the top players in high school coming in?
I would say just the level of talent, obviously. Um, I came off the bench. I was the sixth man, seventh man off the bench. I was one of the first two guys. First, it was me and Tracy coming off of the bench. Then Tracy jumped into the starting lineup and replaced Kevin Walker. And then, I got into the game fairly quickly and got minutes. It was just, it was a bit of a faster game, obviously a longer game,
Yeah,
more
yeah.
athletic.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and, making that adjustment was interesting. Um, but again, I do think that a lot of your development and your growth is on the approach of your staff and how your staff takes you and utilizes you.
Right.
Um, and I think Herrick would say this. He grew a bunch between our group and the 95 group
Yeah,
because
yeah.
that 95 group, he really did. He opened it up for Toby and for Chris and for JR and Charles and really had those guys have significant roles, and really pushed those guys. He didn't really, put straps or parameters on them. And not only that, the leadership at the top of that team with Ed O'Bannon, Tyus Sedney, and George Zedek, you know, they didn't care. It was all about winning.
Hmm.
We win, it takes care of everything else. And, they ran out there so fast and so well. It was fun to watch those guys play because really, you just didn't care. Toby still holds the record for most points by a freshman in a national championship game, 20, I think 26
Yeah,
or something like
26.
that.
Yep, yep,
Yeah.
yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's big, man. Big.
No, no, huge, huge.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, you have a lot of great things happen to you at UCLA. What would you say the biggest lesson you learned from UCLA going into your next, the next level?
In terms of basketball,
Yeah.
I, I would say this, man. What I learned at UCLA was to persevere.
Hmm.
Um, my career at UCLA didn't go how I wanted it to go.
Right.
You know, um, I thought that I would have a bigger career at UCLA, and for whatever reason, it just didn't happen. I try to think back on it and try to pinpoint certain things.
Hmm.
It was solid. I played. I played when I finished playing. I played more games than anybody in the history of UCLA. So it wasn't that I didn't, get an opportunity to play. I just didn't feel like I played the way I was capable of playing.
Mm.
Um,
Okay.
and then I remember getting to the league my rookie year, and I'd never scored over 20 points in a game at UCLA. My all my 4 years,
Oh, that I did not
never
know.
scored over 20 points. That's a crazy stat considering, in high school I had all these banana games with all of these points, and I never scored over 20 at UCLA. My career high at UCLA is 19. And I get to the league and I did, over 20 several times in my rookie year. And, uh, and I remember guys that I used to train with used to ask Don McClain, because Don was on my team in Washington, like, man, Mitch is playing very different, and it was just a different feel for me. When I got to the league, I felt like the game sped up enough for me to catch up, and I understood it. And,
Right, right, right,
there
right.
was lots of good one-on-one play. And as a one-on-one player, I was pretty good with a good first step. And if I got a first step on you, um, I could get to the rim and do some damage. So, it worked well for me. But, the lesson that I learned at UCLA was to persevere, man. Like, and I would tell this to any of the players that are there. Um, tell your own story, man. Write your own story.
Mm.
Don't let anybody else write it for you because they will, man. They
Yeah.
will, they will, they will try to tell you what you are, what you can be, who you are, and how far you can go. Um, really believe in yourself. And it
Hmm.
took all 4 years at UCLA and me leaving and going to the league and getting really a small window opportunity chance to make it